afternoon. Here is the world at noon. Nigerian president expresses displeasure over the intelligence system after inspecting Kuje prison. Mozambican president hosts phone talk with Ukraine. Argentine ex-army officers jailed over crime against humanity. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari says he is disappointed with the intelligence system and utilization at the Medium Security Custodial Center, Kuje, in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. He said this while speaking to journalists during his visit to the correctional facility, which came under attack by terrorists last night. He was also surprised that at the end of the attack, none of the 63 terrorists were accounted for, but the records were not lost because they had been backed up. The president also informed that the security forces have recaptured 350 of the escapees, while about 450 others were still unaccounted for, and that rapid work was underway to recapture them. According to President Buhari, like most Nigerians, were shocked by both the scale and audacity of the attack. The president, who was accompanied by the secretary to the government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, and his chief of staff, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, said he was expecting a comprehensive report on the incident and the visit. Mozambican President Mr. Filip Nyusi and his Ukrainian counterpart Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky has held a phone conversation to discuss the situation in Ukraine. According to a tweet by Mr. Zelensky, the two leaders discussed the situation on the war front and food security. Report has it that the war in Ukraine has worsened with already existing grain shortages in Africa caused by bad harvest and insecurity. Over 40% of wheat consumed in Africa usually comes from Russia and Ukraine. Mr. Zelensky expresses interest in explaining to African countries about the security situation in his country. On his part, the Mozambican president explained why his country abstained from voting on an UN resolution that condemned Russia's invasion of its neighbor. Mr. Yunzi said the dispute should be resolved through dialogue. He welcomed Mr. Zelensky's intention to speak to African countries about the situation in Ukraine and to address economic ties with African countries. A court in Argentina has sentenced 19 former military officers to long prison terms for crimes against humanity during the country's military dictatorships in 1973 to 83. The crimes included forced disappearances, murder, torture, and kidnapping of children. Among those sentenced were General Santiago Riveros, previously convicted for other human rights violations. He received a life sentence after being found guilty of more than 100 crimes. The sentences were handed down by the federal court in the capital, Buenos Aires. It ruled that crimes were committed against some 350 victims. Among them were 6 auto plant workers at a Mercedes-Benz factory who were abducted by right-wing death squads for having union sympathies. This is the word at noon, coming to you from Osun State Broadcasting Corporation. Ile-Awiye Okebale Oshogbo, now our mid news message. Nigeria can lead African continents and indeed the world if Nigerians could be patriotic enough to serve it with love, strength, and faith. UK Prime Minister Mr. Boris Johnson's government is on the brink of collapse as more than 40 ministers from Johnson's Conservative Party resigned during the week. Reports are that after 2 senior cabinet ministers and several junior ministers resigned, another string of senior and junior ministers has announced their resignations the following day, bringing the total number of resignations to 49 as at today, as well as one minister that Mr. Johnson fired. Meanwhile, after defiantly rejecting calls for his resignation, UK Prime Minister Mr. Boris Johnson was expected to step down as leader of his party today, which will eventually see him removed from the country's top job. Mr. Johnson's office at 10 Downing Street confirmed that he would make a statement to the country today, as the BBC and other British news outlets said he had agreed to resign. The move comes after dozens of high-profile resignations by members of his cabinet and government. The 58-year-old Mr. Johnson was expected to publicly announce his resignation as leader of the Conservative Party later today, but he intends to stay on as Prime Minister until the fall. CBS news partner network BBC report has it that plan was quickly called into question by members of his own party. Mexican President Mr. Andres Manuel Lopez has said that he will present a proposal for a bold immigration policy to his U.S. counterpart Mr. Joe Biden on July 12 at the White House. Speaking at a daily news conference, Mr. Lopez Obrador said the migration crisis both nations are facing will be the leading topic of discussion. He said the aim of the policy is to regulate the migratory flow between the two countries. Mr. Lopez said part of the joint plan he will present to Mr. Biden includes the negotiation of work visas for farmers, workers and professionals. The announcement came after at least 53 people were found dead in a tractor trailer in the U.S. state of Texas last week. Authorities found dozens of deceased migrants inside the back of the truck in San Antonio amid high temperatures on June 27. Mr. Lopez said 22 Mexicans were among the dead. And here again are the highlights of the world at noon. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari says he is disappointed with the intelligence system and utilization at the Medium Security Custodial Center, Kuje, in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. Mozambican President Mr. Philip Nyusi and his Ukrainian counterpart Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky has held a phone conversation to discuss the situation in Ukraine. A court in Argentina has sentenced 19 former military officers to long prison terms for crimes against humanity during the country's military dictatorship in 1976 to 83. That was the World at Noon, edited by Olushola Egbedofo and delivered by Timitokwe Olajiwola. In today's news talk, Adeyemi Abodere of OSBC Sports Department chronicles Governor Adegboyega Itola's food support scheme, which has assisted vulnerable in the state of Osun a great deal in terms of feeding adequately. Of its social welfare intervention programs to give the vulnerables in the state a sense of belonging, Osun State Government for over 2 years ago has been distributing various food items, including rice, semovita, noodles, among others, under its food support scheme across the state. While flagging off the scheme in April 2020, Governor Adegboyega Itola stressed that the scheme was designed to feed more than 100,000 poor and vulnerable homes every month till the end of the administration. This the governor and his team has been doing till now. The initiative was an ample opportunity for Governor Itola to fulfill his administration's avowed determination to provide a buffer for the vulnerable, especially those who, on the account of the impact of the coronavirus, have been thrown off balance economically and emotionally. The scheme, which is postcode social intervention program, has unearthed the necessity of an emergency food relief for the economically vulnerable whose standards of living were worsened by the debilitating effect of COVID-19 pandemic, which resulted in total lockdown in 2020. It is worthy of note that since the launch of the scheme in April 2020, tens of thousands of households have benefited tremendously from the emergency food relief. Aside this, the initiative has been another way of keeping faith with a government promise to prioritize the welfare and general well-being of the people. Findings reveal that beneficiaries of the food relief scheme were drawn from across the nooks and crannies of the state using the World Bank-sponsored social register, through which the government has continued to cater for the needs of beneficiaries, including the youth, widows, the aged, and the people living with disabilities, as well as members of various religious groups across the state. The scheme, aside feeding the vulnerable, has also boosted local food production and achieved food security in the long run. Commissioner for Regional Integration and Special Duties, Engineer Olalekan Badmus, whose ministry undertakes the monthly distribution and supervision of the scheme, was quoted as saying that so far about 150,000 households have benefited from the scheme for over 2 years now. The food support scheme, according to him, has been carefully calibrated in line with the administration's policy of promoting small, micro and medium businesses to boost the local economy, as all food items are sourced locally to further encourage local farmers and businesses. Some of the beneficiaries of the food support scheme, who described the gesture as first of its kind in the history of the state, also lauded the present administration for keeping faith with its promises. The residents, comprising artisans, widows, the aged, the religious communities, marketmen and women, students, and other ethnic groups who have been storming the distribution centers to collect their packages, could not hide their enthusiasm, saying the distribution had proved that the administration of Governor Adegboyega Oyetola is committed to sustaining the scheme. News Talk is of the opinion that the popular saying that a good turn deserves another should surely come to play when the time arrives for the people of the state to do their best for the re-election of Governor Adegboyega Oyetola, so that a good and laudable initiative can continue in Osun State. That news talk by Adeyemi Abodere of OSBC Sports Department chronicled Governor Adegboyega Oyetola's food support scheme, which has tremendously assisted the vulnerable in the state of Osun to have adequate 3 square meals per day. For more about us, visit www.osbcng.org. Thanks for listening. Good afternoon.